Cool. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Today, we have a absolute killer panel. These founders are extremely technical, in the weeds. They're building leading projects. So I'm excited to have them. Let's do really quick introductions, and we'll dive right in. Alex, let's start with you.
Yeah, Alexander, Pluralis Research. We're working on protocol learning, which is large-scale training, very large models, split over devices, collaboratively trained, and then ownership of those models by the training swarm.
Yeah, maybe yours. It's going to be easier. Sorry. Hey everyone, I'm Jeremy. I'm actually replacing Jasper. I'm leading business operations at Hyperbolic. And at Hyperbolic, we're building decentralized AI infrastructure. In other words, we're building the first pure peer-to-peer cloud for AI innovation. Would be happy to chat a bit more about this.
Hey all, I'm Manveer. I lead protocol at Prime Intellect. We're essentially building a peer-to-peer compute and intelligence protocol where we aggregate global compute, train open models, and enable co-ownership of intelligence.
Hey everyone, I'm Ben, co-founder of Gensyn. We're building the network for machine intelligence. So we connect together every machine learning capable compute device in the world and guarantee consistent execution, communication between the devices, and verification of those devices. So essentially, you can treat the entire world's compute as just a resource that's accessible programmatically on demand. A machine learning researcher or engineer doesn't have to find a cluster and kind of SSH into it to run jobs on it. They can just push a model out to this kind of global resource and it'll train somewhere over some subset of the world's compute sources. It could be one MacBook, it could be 1,000 MacBooks, it could be 100,000 GPUs, it doesn't matter. We build all of that low-level infrastructure.
Hi, my name is Hoansoo, co-founder of Exabits. We're in the business of providing high-performance compute to Web 2 and Web 3 customers for AI.
All right, so let's dive right into it. One of the key questions is, what are your projects doing to effectively compete and win versus your traditional AI counterparts? Why do we need crypto? Why do we need communities? Very varied group of projects here, so the answer will be different for each one. We could start with whoever wants to go first, but why do you feel so strongly you can compete effectively with traditional AI companies and win?
Maybe I'll just say something to set the scene. I actually think there is no real open source AI today. And I think that's actually what a lot of us are trying to achieve here is, you look at open source AI, what is it? It's large, established institutions releasing base models for free. My view is that's effectively unsustainable. There's never been a large-scale collaborative run because no one's actually one, the tech's very hard, and then two, how do you actually structure these incentives in a way that makes sense? How do you give people ownership? Things like this. These are hard questions, and I view it much less as we have to compete with centralized AI and more that there is just no alternative there today, and there needs to be one.
There are a bunch of things. I would say the first point is basically providing open access to compute. Compute is a huge bottleneck today. And when you're doing decentralized infrastructure like what Hyperbolic is building, what we're basically at the end of the day, what we're doing is that we realize that there's a lot of idle GPU capacities all around the world that is coming from multiple different sources. It can be like data centers, it can be on-prem machines, individual machines or mining farms. And the reality is that we needed to create like an OS in order to make sure that those machines can be plugged in and then provided to people who really need it the most, like researchers, developers, and startups, SMBs. And the reality is because we can do that with a fair market, with supply and demand, we can actually compete against hyperscalers that are putting crazy amounts of margins and that are actually pushing the brakes for innovation from the go-to-market verticals that I just gave before. Another thing which is really fun with crypto is that because of crypto, you can actually, in other words, subsidize the cost of compute and making it much more again, accessible than the hyperscalers. And the last step is obviously on the UX UI. I don't know if anyone has tried to rent EC2 instances on AWS, but unless you have a master or a PhD, it can take some time, So it's basically, trying to make it much more simple for everyone to get access to compute and to those open source models.
To be honest, I feel like the scarcest thing in this crypto AI intersection is actual legitimacy from AI people. I mean, you can do all this stuff with like aggregating compute. Obviously, we're going to get a lot of compute. Like all these protocols are going to get a lot of compute. We're going to be able to train open models. But like, do you actually have like legitimate AI researchers and legitimate AI builders like building with you? I feel like that's actually incredibly scarce, and that's also incredibly hard to get. So at least like our approach is actually like earning buy-in from that community. Like all like the decentralized training runs that we launched, like it's getting hyped up by like Google DeepMind authors. Like everything that we release, even like our synthetic one run where we did synthetic data generation on top of DeepSeek R1, like that gets people in the AI community actually like excited. We have a lot of like investors as well too who are like aligned on this. We have like Clem from Hugging Face. We have like Andre Karpathy, you know, like we have like sufficient buy-in, I think, from the AI ecosystem for us to actually be able to build a community around there and get them like using our platform to build with us. Because if you actually want to build something that's like competitive with the closed labs, you obviously need like the best open source AI researchers like working with you. And so I think that's like the hardest thing to tackle, and I think we're actually like doing a good job of tackling that.
So I agree with Manveer. We definitely need legitimacy in this space. I think crypto has a tendency to sprint towards proof of concepts rather than actually building like real tech and real products behind things. And it's very clear here that that's what we need to do. We need to build real infrastructure that people can actually use to solve problems that they have in the Web 2 world. They shouldn't be thinking necessarily about crypto. They should be thinking, hey, we had this problem, we had this access to resources problem, which is an economic problem, or we had this kind of bias accumulation problem, which is a philosophical problem, and that is solved by this new infrastructure. I don't necessarily need to know that behind the scenes it's facilitated by like a trust mechanism that crypto gives us. They just need to know the world changed and it's got better. So I guess in kind of contrast to Prime Intellect's approach, our approach is to build that low-level infrastructure, build the tools that people can use to show the demonstrations of building models in this hyper-scalable way, or this peer-to-peer way, decentralized way, or kind of bias reduction way, where everybody could be building machine learning models if the infrastructure was there, but it isn't. So it means we're all using a very small number of companies' models, and if we let that progress for too long, we end up in a pretty tough state, both economically and philosophically. Like I mentioned, power accrues to those companies, resources accrue to those companies, and the world just gets less access to the power of machine learning, essentially.
I think the answers kept evolving as we kept coming down the line. What was the original question again?
I feel bad for you. They take all the
sorry
good
about
answers
that.
by the time it gets there. I don't even remember the original question. Yeah, the advantage of decentralization on the crypto.
Oh, right. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, everyone here, they're all doing really clever, very important things. So at Exabits, our aim is to separate ownership of chips from management. So you hear about these hyperscaler announcements, like they raised hundreds of billions of dollars, or they're committing to spend money in that sort of magnitude in the next several years. And so there's this battle of capital intensity, right? Like whoever has more money can build bigger data centers, and so therefore they can build bigger and better AI. And for us, we sort of take our business model inspiration from the hotel industry, from the hospitality sector, where if you think about the biggest hotel chain in the world, that's Marriott Group, and Marriott Group has about 8,700 hotels. And ask yourselves, like, how many of those hotels they actually own? Does anyone know? It's actually fewer than 50. Okay, so that's less than 1%, bordering 0.5% of the assets that they actually own. So they found out, they found over the years, the value in the value chain is really being able to professionally manage and providing that standardized service and experience to their customers. And we try to do that in the business of providing compute to AI.
We all know the core tenets of crypto, decentralization. Everyone in this room knows that. I'm more interested in the concern that we're not effectively able to draw in traditional AI developers, right? It's a key concern. It's the Wall Street versus crypto dynamic from 6-7 years ago. So you're on a call with an interview. You find a top San Francisco AI cracked engineer. How do you convince them to join your project?
Yeah, I think there's a really straightforward answer, which is you got to publish tier 1 papers. So to me, that's what differentiates these projects. Are they actively publishing ICML, NeurIPS, ICLR? I put you in one bucket. If you're not, I put you in another bucket. I think that's how most serious AI researchers think.
Yeah, I think the real bottleneck obviously is compensation. Whenever you're competing against OpenAI and competing against like Anthropic, the packages that are offering are like crazy, but this is like for everyone. Even if you're like the brightest, YC startup that's in Web3 AI or actually just in pure AI, it's hard to compete. That being said, first off, we've seen something that changed a lot of the dynamics recently, and it's DeepSeek. And it's basically the fact that, like, for the first time, we're seeing that open source has been surpassing proprietary. And it's basically this amazing, what you were saying before, this amazing example of like how those amazing researchers all together, with open source can actually surpass like closed, safeguarded companies that can hire like the best talents all around the world. And we're seeing that at a very, very high pace. So this is amazing. So I think this is one of the top arguments that usually we get to provide to when we get to hire those engineers. I would say the second thing is that we're pretty fortunate at Hyperbolic that we actually have our CTO who became first as a joke, but eventually became reality, an AI KOL today. And so attracting a lot of attention from all of those amazing AI researchers. And so, interacting with Karpathy, interacting with Dean, interacting with like really the highest brains happening today in AI. And we're seeing throughout our partnerships, I think another last point that I wanted to make is like building a very strong brand narrative in Web 2. Like we've been building like very strong partnerships with like Hugging Face, with like Poe by Cora, or like, Black Forest Labs that's building Flux. We're doing revenue sharing model with them. We've been doing the same with like Open Router, where we're routing like our, inference there. And so I think this actually brings a lot of trust from Web 2 and for, AI engineers that we're looking to hire within Hyperbolic, but just in general, in Web3 AI.
Yeah, it's literally just publish. Like, I think Alex's answer is pretty spot on. All the interest that we've gotten from AI people is like, we literally just put our stuff out publicly. It was interesting enough. They reached out, they wanted to work on it, and that was it. Like now we have like a pretty big AI research team, pretty cracked folk as well, pretty cracked folks as well too. So yeah, it's really that simple.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody said it. You just got to prove it, right? You've got to build something that actually works and isn't just a kind of really fluffy sort of crypto-style incentive reward system. It has to be something that people actually see, engage with, want to actually use in their research or use as a product in some way. So yeah, like it's the same answer in every aspect of the decentralized space. Basically, build something actually real. I think separately to that, though, we're still going through this process with the machine learning world of getting over a large degree of cynicism. So I think being able to relate. So my background is machine learning originally. I came into crypto very, very specifically to solve a single problem, which was trust. And I realized completely separately to all of the kind of financial aspects that we could solve the trust problem programmatically within crypto in a way that is cheaper than solving it in the normal human world. And to me, that was just a light bulb moment where I was like, oh, hey, this is a technology which solves a huge problem and is a huge cost reduction. And I think you have to find those moments for technical people where you can cut through all of the monkey pictures and things like that, and you can get down to a real core technical reason with an ML researcher or developer where they realize what the true power of this technology is, not the financial aspects, but the technology itself. And I think that trust piece is absolutely huge. So showing that you can programmatically solve trust is a way to essentially convince people that this world is legitimate.
So at Exabits, we engage on two different sides on the marketplace. So on the customer side, the value proposition is very simple, which is on a performance-adjusted basis, you get the most bang for your buck. So for every dollar of GPU hour compute, you get the highest quality, the most reliable compute that you can get anywhere else in the world. On the supply side, we go to investors and those who are interested in getting that sort of investment-like exposure to compute. We ask them, what are your choices? Well, you might think of NVIDIA. NVIDIA, if you look at their stock price, it's already trading at something like 70 times the book value of their assets. And we tell them, well, through tokenization and using crypto, you're able to get a much more direct one-for-one exposure to compute assets. And this is your best way to get liquidity, the speculative value accretion that you're expecting in the future, and we're the best place to work to work with to getting that kind of exposure.
So our paddle title is recent advances in AI. So I guess we have to hit on that so I don't get yelled at. I'm curious what your favorite and most impactful release has been for either your own project or within the AI realm in the past, let's call it, 1 month, given how fast the space moves, maybe a little bit further, but something that we wouldn't generally know about. Not Claude 3.7, not O1 Pro, a report, a paper, something that tangibly really changed your worldview on your project or AI in general.
I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say it's like unknown, but I had a very strong reaction when I saw the DeepSeek R1 report. And I'll say exactly why. That was the first time I've seen RL work for LLMs with no process reward model. So typically the way people have been trying to do this is you have these intermediate rewards. It comes from a reward model. And I used to study RL, and I know that stuff is not scalable. I know it doesn't work. And there was never a way to do it without these process reward models. That was the first paper that did. And that was the first time when, like, you know, I'm not one of these AI doomer people. I don't think we're gonna have sentient intelligence, but it was the first time I sort of viscerally was like, okay, I can see all the raw ingredients here for something quite significant. And yeah, it would be R1 for sure.
Yeah, I feel we're all going to talk about it because it's sort of like the elephant in the room, but DeepSeek obviously was a huge moment. Just in general, just talking about what I was explaining before, how open source AI for the first time is surpassing like closed source. I think this is like one big thing. I think the second thing was the reaction on NVIDIA was actually way too, like when you work in the space, like not very understandable, because at the end of the day, like, you know, GPUs are not only for training purposes, they're also for inference. And obviously, you know, the reliability on inference is, you know, just growing whenever you're having like those models, and you know, things that are becoming like more and more impactful. I think the third thing that people realize, and coming back to your point, is like reinforcement learning, you know, and a lot of like optimization methods that have been used by, you know, the team behind DeepSeek has been extremely smart. And it's again another example of how you can work under constraints. You know, when you don't have access to like those huge hyperscalers capacity in terms of compute, when you don't have access to huge amounts of money, you're getting started early stage, you basically are in a position where if you think the process right, and if you actually dig, you know, very deep in terms of like the understanding of machine learning and the understanding of like, you know, artificial intelligence, it's actually getting really cool. Another thing that I really like is the development that's happening right now around like ASICs, you know, like algorithm specific like integrated circuits. Like there's some solutions, like alternative solutions to GPUs that are, you know, popping in from all around the world, mostly coming from Silicon Valley. But, you know, there's solutions like Cerebras that are super interesting, that are providing like inference at like Godspeed, you know, other solutions like Grok, and the last step is obviously, you know, other solutions like a company called Etched that is actually building the first like ASIC transformer that is really trying to optimize the speed of you know, inference and reducing the cost and reducing the energy. And so I think this innovation is you know, up and coming, and is going to change a lot of things, especially you know, post DeepSeek.
Yeah, I mean, you guys touched on DeepSeek already, so I'll try to add something else. I think one of the most interesting things that I read recently was a semi-analysis. They had a Substack post on this whole inference time reasoning paradigm, like this like distributed RL type paradigm. I think that's quite interesting because it's essentially this idea that like you can have like a more central training cluster, and you can have like millions of worker nodes that are generating synthetic data. You have verifiers that are like identifying which is the actual like useful and high signal synthetic data that you can then feed back into the training run and training model. And it's pretty obvious that this is going to be like the next quote unquote like scaling paradigm. And I think this is like a scaling paradigm that favors the decentralized approach like much more strongly. Like if you can have like millions of consumer GPUs like collectively contributing to generating synthetic data for like a training run, like I think that's like that goes incredibly hard. Like you can tap into like a level of compute that I don't think these centralized labs will be able to like compete with longer term. So that seems like most interesting from our perspective, and that's also like the way that we're targeting our roadmap too.
So I'm going to give you a shameless plug because I have recency bias, and about an hour ago we released something that I think is really cool. So we released something called RL Swarm, which on the kind of reasoning trend that we're talking about is essentially this idea that you can do reasoning collaboratively. So a model can do its own reasoning, it can kind of refine its own thinking, etc., but they can also do it to each other. And so if you connect up multiple models, those models can critique each other's answers, and they can get to a better answer collectively, and they can also update their own answers. The crucial piece with this, though, is that doesn't need to be centralized in any way. It can be done over a gossip network. So anybody here on a MacBook or on a GPU could run RL Swarm, which we've designed, and you could be collaborating with other nodes to improve your answers on specific questions. So instead of just teaching models to think and do the chain of thought reasoning, you also teach them to talk. You teach them to send each other their own answers, to critique each other's answers, and through time they all get better together. We're really excited about this. We think it is incredibly horizontally scalable, so you can just keep adding nodes to this swarm. You can make subswarms, you can kind of do any connectivity you want with these devices. But through time, it gives us this ability to all have local models that improve together without relying on a centralized party. So you don't have to pull a model or specifically hit an API from Open AI. You can have your local llama and you can improve it with everybody else around you. You could choose who you improve it with. You could improve it with everyone. It's up to you, but this all happens entirely peer-to-peer, no centralized party involved.
Bullish.
So as a service provider, we don't have any new product introductions to brag about. But I think just going back to the DeepSeek conversation, I know that the general media focused a lot on the NVIDIA's pricing and whether or not there's enough demand to support a lot of the hype in AI. But I think there's a missing piece here, which is DeepSeek is really a demonstration of unit economics getting much cheaper, right? To train AI, it's a demonstration of efficiency gains, and that economies of scale is really a lot closer than we thought. And I think a big question before that was whether or not AI remains very big and few, in the hands of the largest mega cap, big tech companies, versus more tail end retail-based users that's more customized with more emphasis on privacy and ownership. And I think DeepSeek is one example, at least in that direction of the latter, and which is of course very good news for decentralized AI and for the Web3 community.
Cool. So I have one question left. Agents are one of the main ways the world sees the capabilities of AI, right? Whether it's trading or an LLM bot or a new model or new tools or functionality or things like that. This is mostly an infra type panel, but I'm curious, like when and why would an agent use your project? And if it does so, why is it differentiated?
Yeah, I think it's a really simple answer. If an agent's using a centralized API, they pay for it, they lose all value, and I think the actual agent layer is not going to capture a large amount. I actually think there's very little stack to this tech. I think the stack is the base models. And the whole point is if you can do collaborative training, you can do fractional ownership. And so the incentive would be if you're running an agent layer and you want to have fractional ownership of the model, you can. There's no way to do that today.
Great question. Just taking a quick step back, because at the end of the day, we're at the Open AGI Summit, so we're talking about AGI, we're talking about ASI. I personally live in San Francisco. It's in the mouth of everyone, in the streets. Anywhere you go, people will be talking about AGI and ASI. And just taking a step back, it's what are the steps to go there? So there's broadly maybe 5 steps to reach AGI. The first one being the chatbots. So we've all interacted with them. We're all familiar with them. Even all of our grandparents are interacting with ChatGPT and other solutions today. The second one is reasoning. So we've started seeing this with O1 and now with DeepSeek and a bunch of new models and new generation of models. So this is really cool. The third step, is the one that we're entering right now, which is agents, AI agents, and agenting world. The fourth step is basically those agents that are becoming so smart that they're becoming innovators and basically are trying to solve problems that humans haven't been able to solve yet. And then the fifth step is basically autonomous AI agent society. And so for that, actually blockchain and crypto will be the way to solve it. And in that way, Hyperbolic is doing a lot of things. So first off, we have an EAC innovation team that is building we build our own agent kit. And so we've been doing running some cool experiments. It's when you go on Hyperbolic, you have this GPU marketplace access. And so we basically created sort of a smart contract wallet where we injected some money into this agent that can call the API and check which compute is available on Hyperbolic, getting access to the compute, and then literally live on Hyperbolic and evolve on Hyperbolic. You can ingest a specific data set and become in other words, sort of verticalized and more specialized in a specific field. You can become an operator on EigenLayer. You can become a validator on Ethereum. There's a lot of cool things that can be done. I would say, just to wrap things up, we're also, since we're providing infra, like we're partnering with a lot of amazing like AI agents companies, like Virtuals and Zero Bro and like, AI 16Z and a bunch of others. And this, serving as the foundation in terms of compute and in terms of services. And basically, I would say sort of like the last step of all of this is how, agents can, by utilizing all of this tech stack, be in a situation where we can track and see everything that they get to execute. And I think for the first time ever, blockchain can actually solve that problem. There's some solutions like Consensus, OPML, ZKML. We created our own at Hyperbolic, and it's basically called proof of sampling. And that will be the best way to actually verify AI agents on chain and see all of the actions that they're concretely making and see if, where they're heading and what they're doing, is I think extremely powerful when you use blockchain and transparency.
Yeah, I mean, Alec is kind of coming in with some hot takes. I kind of like it. I'm
turning it down right now. I can
Turn it up.
I think all of agents is cope. I think it's an attempt for people to try and capture value, and I think there's very little value capture there in the end of the day.
Sorry.
So I think you have like this clear need for retail to capture some level of value of what's about to be like a massive wave of value capture. And I think people are attacking the agents layer because it's doable, not because it's right. You can make an agent and you can sell it and you can give it to people and you can attract revenue. But at the end of the day, all that value flow is flowing it's to the base models. That's where this is all going. And so the reason people aren't attacking the base model layer is because it's very difficult. It's very hard to try and do this. But if you think about it rationally, that's where you need actual fractional ownership, not at the agent layer.
I don't know. I kind of like strongly disagree with that.
Let's go.
I mean, if you look at like all the agents right now, whether it's like Virtuals or Eliza or whatever, like what are the compute costs of these agents? What are like the model costs? Like they're using open source models. Maybe they're like paying like a couple cents for inference, and they're capturing like millions and billions of dollars in value. And like you might be able to say that that's like the current state of things, and like maybe things won't look like that in the future. But I don't know. Like why are people investing in like Open AI, for example, right?
Yeah.
Like they would probably have some bet that like OpenAI is going to produce some agents. Like, I mean, I've seen some of the like software engineering agent demos from OpenAI. Like, they're pretty quite strong too. And I think they're going to be able to capture like a significant amount of like economic value. And so like obviously like the compute layer will capture a lot of value, but I also think like the intelligence layer will as well too, which is why we're building a like peer-to-peer compute and intelligence protocol.
Yeah, I think there's two worlds, right? There's a world where scaling stops and we have rich open source models, in which case all this is fine. Like agents make sense, it's all good. That's not the world I think is likely. I think the world that's likely is more compute keeps making the models better. And if you're in that world and these costs keep going up, even as the efficiency of the training goes down, you end up with this very small number of providers. And you don't actually have rich open source AI, because rich open source AI requires on people donating a large amount of capital. Like that's the fundamental difference on what people would call open source AI today and what trad open source software is. Trad open source software is people donating time and expertise. Open source AI today is people donating large amounts of money. It's not sustainable if that cost keeps going up. Today it just depends on Meta or DeepSeek releasing these models for free. So I think it depends on what your view of scaling is. If you think that scaling is going to continue for a little while longer, I actually think it's very, very hard to make the case that the agent layer will actually capture a lot, because they won't have access to the strong base models unless the model provider lets them.
I think the agent layer accrues value only in the sense of capturing customers. To me, the only real value accrual within machine learning in the future is the infrastructure layer and the user layer. So do you have all the users coming to you specifically as a company, which is what OpenAI is sprinting to do, it's what Anthropic is sprinting to do, it's why people invest in these companies, because right now their bet is that they can make the best model, which will get the headlines, which will get the users will get personalization within the platform, they'll get tied in, and then they'll stay in that platform. So everyone is rushing to capture the users in the model building space. On the other side, you've got the infrastructure, which just does not go away. It's always expensive, it always exists, you always need it. And if, like Alex said, if you believe in scaling, then you believe that it's always going to have an increasing need. And so we focus very specifically at the infrastructure layer. We do not look at the consumer layer, but we believe that that middle slice, the models themselves, will become completely commoditized. I think open source is inevitable for that layer because of how distillable models are. Once you've created a model and you give somebody access to to that model, they can extract entropy from it, essentially. And through time, they can extract the value from your model. So it becomes a competitive advantage to put your model open source, because when you do that, you gain more mind share, you get more people building on top of your type of model. Your model improves with the kind of effort of humanity rather than just you, which is Meta's bet. They've done it before. They're good at doing that. But I think inevitably we have open source models. The problem is, we don't want those open source models to just be created by a single company. We want them to be trained by everyone multiple times so that we don't accrue too much bias into the models. But yeah, from my perspective, it's a barbell. The value is at the infrastructure layer and at the consumer layer. All the model companies right now are sprinting to capture consumers. The infrastructure layer is kind of open. NVIDIA have benefited reasonably well from it so far. But that middle ground, there's no value in there, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. I think you like literally nailed it. Like nobody wants to invest. Like I don't want to invest in GPT-4. Like okay, sure, maybe it like makes some of its value back in like in inference revenue, but I want to invest in Open AI. I want to invest in the entity that's actually producing these models, right? And I think like over time in the future, like obviously, yeah, like NVIDIA is making a lot of money. Like where's the actual like value getting like accrued to right now? Like it's NVIDIA, and then it's all these like model producers. It's these systems that are producing these models. And I think over time, it'll probably look like where you have like, for example, like maybe like a world-class like software engineering agent that is doing tasks in the real world. It's getting contact with reality. That's like ground truth data that it can use to like generate more synthetic data to self-improve itself. Like that's something that I'm actually interested in investing in. I'm not interested in investing in the base model that's behind this thing. I'm interested in investing in like the self-improving agent itself. And so I think that's where like people will like allocate their capital. I think like people will value governance over that thing. So yeah, I think like your point is exactly right. It would be like the app agent layer as well as the infrastructure layer.
Not a whole lot to add, but operating in the base layer, for us, we support the layers above us and the agentic economy to flourish by really being obsessively focused on maximizing cost-adjusted quality of compute, in performance and also.
You win in all cases. You're good. It doesn't matter.
I mean, so like where does some of that efficiency gain come from? In the hard technology research and development on the compute side, but also on the supply side, you're dealing with chips that cost well over $40,000 per unit, and right now we have the highest end, the Blackwell chips in our network, that supports the trust execution environment technology, which is of course one of the big cutting edge benefits in supporting these layers. But at the end of the day, on the supply side, we're looking to gain a lot of efficiencies by developing the financialization and building a really mature capital markets around chips. And this is something that we know that it's very well established and done very well in the traditional finance world. But we hope to bring that in the DeFi and see unlock a lot of that benefit in AI compute.
We're getting kicked off. I wish we weren't. We could maybe run this back on the podcast for a longer form discussion. You guys absolutely crushed it. Really enjoyed the convo and the hot takes. Thank you.
Thanks, Tommy.
Thank you.